and conflict in some regions.
On earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Good afternoon. It is my honor and great pleasure to stand here before you as the First Lady of the United States.
Well, that was a breath of fresh air. Now, I'm not saying that we need to shout things from the rooftops when it comes from a religious perspective, but something as simple as the Lord's Prayer, that's a worthwhile campaign event, because there's nothing wrong with any of those words.
The America we envision is one that works for all Americans, and where all Americans can work and succeed. A nation committed to a greater civility and unity between people from all sides of the political divide. I will always stay true to myself and be truthful to you, no matter what the opposition is saying about me. I will act in the best interest of all of you. I'm committed to creating and supporting initiatives dear to my heart, which will have impact on women and children all around the world. My husband is creating a country of great safety and prosperity. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to introduce the President of the United States, Donald Trump.
Now that's something different, y'all. That's something different, because first off, it's obvious. Melania does not speak English as her native tongue, and you can hear that. That's fine. We're Americans. We're a great big melting pot. We can afford that, and we're cool with that. As a matter of fact, even the people that are seen as those evil, mean racists are out there cheering her on for 2 solid minutes. It's rare that you see the First Lady come out and get this much support. And I find that very unusual in political history. Granted, people are usually nicer to the First Ladies than they are to their husbands. And that started to change when Hillary Clinton started getting everyone's business back in the 90s. But you have this unusual night and day difference between, let's say, Melania and, Michelle's too easy. How about Jill? Let's talk about Jill Biden for a brief moment. Jill Biden, in my opinion, is the one controlling Joe. Because she's the only one that knows how to properly handle him. Because he, behind the scenes, is apparently going crazy. He has no idea why Americans hate his guts. He has no idea why he isn't more popular than the polls. He is basically incredibly angry, at least when he's not eating ice cream, taking a nap, or stumbling up the steps of Air Force One. Now, this might trigger some people to know, but you know what? Good. They should be triggered. And the best way to trigger your liberal friends is to go to our friends over at basespy.shop, link in the description below, show off to everyone how good you're looking and how conservative you really are. And so Joe Biden's out there just rambling about things that he no longer has any memory of, because his memory's gone. and Jill's out there doing her best to keep Joe in line from complete implosion. And ultimately, she's done a fantastic job at that. But it means that I have no clue what she's trying to do as a first lady. I think there's been a couple times in history where this has happened. But you think that at least Melania has a lucid husband. I think that's ultimately the choice that we have in 2024. But you have ultimately a first lady who is full of dignity, full of grace, and full of humility. And then you have others that are trying to do too much with too little. And I think the choice is going to be very, very clear coming soon. Folks, my name is Brian. Hope you enjoyed this segment here on Politibrawl. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you on the next one. Until then, y'all have a good one.
هي اللي بلشت معانا في الجريمه هذه تبعت غزه، واليوم الدول امريكا هي اللي بدها تشترينا بالمساعده، احنا بدنا نضل تحت الحرب احسن ما ترمينا مساعده امريكا. هذه تكفي مدرسه، تكفي هذه وقعت من الطياره 10,000 شخص تكفي هذه مساعده.
The United States, which is a full partner in Israel's genocidal onslaughts on the Gaza Strip, and which is a full partner in the siege of the Gaza Strip, is seeking to divert attention from its role and from Israel's role, and seeking to provide legitimacy to the siege by dropping a few thousand meals ready to eat from the sky.
Dropping some food, and we're dropping the bombs and the tanks and the bullets and everything else. That's what he's going to do. Stop sending the money and the weapons.
Shalom, shalom, brothers and sisters. It's Pastor Tim, where we're going to do a lakeside. Well, NATO continues its provocation of Russia with new long-range weapons to try to be attacked inside of Russia. That is the move, and we heard Jens Stoltenberg last week giving Zelensky the go-ahead, the green light. You know what? Use these long-range weapons to attack inside Russia. How is that going to go? And you'd have to be a fool to think that Putin is just sort of going to sit back and let that unfold on his watch as you attack his sovereign territory. Earlier today, Putin revealed that the new Sarmat intercontinental nuclear missiles have entered service with the Russian army. And over the past few hours, Russia has mobilized a portion of their nuclear missiles onto the streets. It's always interesting when you see nuclear missiles rolling down the street. Colonel Douglas McGregor posted this on X a few hours ago. Moscow's message: do not escalate and attack Russia. Moscow controls the escalatory ladder, not Washington. We hold a weak hand and are bluffing. In poker, we call it a dead man's hand. Moscow holds a strong hand, and it's not bluffing. We thought we'd ask the Colonel himself to go in more detail about this, and Colonel McGregor joins us now. Nice to see you, Colonel. Welcome.
Good to see you too, Cleve.
Well, you say Russia is not bluffing, and I think a lot of people in the West, it seems like they continue to play this game. Like, how much can we needle him? How much can we surround Russia before it's like a caged bear?
Oh, I think that's right. And you would think at this point they would have figured out after, almost 3 years. It's a big mistake to underestimate the Russians. They're actually quite serious about defending their country, which is what they demonstrated when they went into eastern Ukraine.
But I think the important thing to keep in mind with these nuclear missiles is as follows. If you try to enter Russian sovereign territory on the ground with any European or American military formations, if you strike us on the ground, anything that is significant, we have the capability to annihilate you. And we will use it. And we will start at the tactical level with tactical nuclear weapons, and we'll work our way up as needed. They're not about to back down and leave Ukraine under any circumstances, and they're certainly not interested in the war. If they were, we'd have been at war with Russia a long time ago. That's obvious. But they're not going to sit there and pretend that they somehow or another are going to be intimidated by us. And we have nothing with which to challenge them. Our ground forces are in ruins. I'm sure you've seen the news with Macron, who stood up and turned himself into the proverbial turd in the punch bowl by suggesting that Europeans should be prepared to march into eastern Ukraine.
Yeah, Napoleon Bonaparte Macron.
Yeah, except Napoleon actually had a real army. You know, Macron has there are 72,000 troops in the British Army. The French Army is a little larger, but these are boutique forces. They're all designed to essentially oppress people that can't defend themselves in North Africa or the Middle East or Africa itself. I mean, they don't have forces that are designed to fight anybody who can fight back.
What do you make of the back and forth then with Macron saying we're not taking this off the table to put ground forces in Ukraine on the part of the French government? Olaf Scholz then having to come out and deliver a video message where he says, under no circumstances, as I, Chancellor of Germany, would put forces into Ukraine. Maybe it is, by the way, I was kind of reading into that. I was really studying his language there because I think you speak German, you understand. The way what he was saying specifically is I, as Chancellor, would not put ground forces into Ukraine, Germany. But he doesn't have the power to do that. The Bundestag does. So he wouldn't be the one that would put ground forces in there anyway. Anyway, I found that interesting, this back and forth between he and Macron. What did you make of that?
Well, strictly speaking, Scholz fancies himself a Bismarckian figure. And the German Chancellor, certainly before World War I, was an enormously powerful figure. And he had great authority to do almost anything he wanted given to him by the Emperor. So I think there's a certain amount of self-delusion involved with that. But he knows the Germans have no interest in this. Nobody in Europe has an interest in going to war in Ukraine. All of this is a proxy effort. What can we do to weaken Russia? You would think by now the fools would recognize that all they've done is strengthen Russia. Russia is stronger militarily now than it's been since the 1980s. Now they're showing you the latest tactical nuclear weapons, mobile nuclear missiles that can essentially hit any target they need to in Europe. They could vaporize airfields, ports, cities as needed. The other thing is we don't have any air defense. In other words, we talk about air and missile defense. We really don't have much.
In the United States?
Well, both in the United States and in Europe. We've always depended on our air forces, and the underlying assumption has been that our air forces can penetrate anything and drop bombs with impunity and launch missiles with impunity. That's not really true anymore. The Russians are heavily invested in integrated air defenses, integrated air and missile defenses. They're quite prepared to deal with us if we rely exclusively on the Air Force. And to be blunt, that's all we've got right now.
Ooh, terrifying to think about. We talk about Star Wars of the 1980s. We talk about the Iron Dome in Israel, right? But the United States is sort of a sitting duck here. We can't even handle quote-unquote Chinese spy balloons flying over Montana, for crying out loud. We panicked when Balloon Boy was up a number of years ago. Remember that famous story?
Yeah.
So it's unbelievable to me. I think a lot of people sort of sitting back going about their day-to-day business here, but NATO just keeps going, keeps expanding. Jens Stoltenberg last week telling Zelensky, long-range weapons, we're giving you the green light to attack inside of Russia. NATO membership for Sweden. This is moving right up to their back door. I mean, something has to give here. I mean, we're at this like boiling point moment here, and I don't know what do you think is going to give?
NATO is never so weak as when it appears to be strong. The more talk you hear about unity of effort and larger, more powerful NATO capabilities, the less seriously you should take any of these comments. You've got 32 states today constituting the so-called NATO alliance, getting agreement on much of anything. including, which door do we use in the conference room to get to the bathroom, is impossible. There's no unity of thinking or effort at all. The whole sham alliance is designed to create avenues of approach for Europeans to us. It's another channel of communication to try and acquire U.S. favor and support and backing. These are all small countries today. They're much like the Greek city-states in the age of the Roman Empire. We're a sort of declining Rome at this point. I hope Americans will figure that out and act against it, but we're a declining Rome. The European states are like the little Greek city-states that were entirely dependent upon Roman military power to save them from the Macedonians. This whole business is a sham. NATO is probably not going to survive. I wouldn't pay any attention to any of it. I think Schultz knows that if he takes a stupid decision, let's send 3 German brigades, towards Belarusia, something like that, he'll be out of office. Not only will his political structure collapse, will the economy tank, but the whole NATO alliance will go out of business.
I want to ask you to put on your political hat for a moment. Of course, you served Donald Trump at the Pentagon, and you see what's happening now in an election year. You see this back and forth fighting over Ukraine aid. Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, saying, look, I'm not giving up this leverage. That seems to be the only leverage they have right now, Republicans have, which is this Ukraine aid to try to get something done at the U.S. southern border. But at the end of the day, Victoria Nuland says, I see Congress passing this money. There's going to be another $60 billion that'll flow to Ukraine. What do you think is going to happen in Washington? Will this aid get passed, moved towards Ukraine?
On one hand, Victoria Nuland is referring to the structure of power in Washington, which is entirely in the hands of the great lobby and lobbies. Right. In other words, not the Israel lobby, the defense lobby, any number of wealthy billionaire oligarchs that have bought up politicians for years. They are ultimately making policy in Washington, D.C. So she's banking on that working. There's a problem with that assumption. And the problem is that everyone in the United States who is an American citizen, I'm talking about Americans, those of us that don't hyphenate our identity, those of us who don't live here part-time or only when the weather's good or something else, we're Americans. We are not interested in what's happening anywhere in the world, but right now, our own country and the southern border. Everyone is watching millions upon millions of people pile into this country. People that we are not only not vetting, but these are people that are supposed to be rapidly repurposed as future voters for the uniparty in Washington, D.C. to provide for permanent government. Americans are waking up. They figured that out. They're watching the criminality. We could sit here and talk for hours about all the crimes committed by these recently arrived so-called migrants. They're just illegal aliens that the administration has decided to let in. And they've got lots of backing from wealthy people. You've got people like the Koch brothers that support this sort of thing for reasons that they have that are exclusively of importance to them. There's no one with any real money or power influencing Washington decision-making in favor of the country. In other words, you, I, and millions of us are really not represented. So we're told, stand around, sit down, don't get excited, and let us overrun your country and create a new majority that will govern you and reduce you effectively to a shameless, mindless consumer. Be part of the sheeple and shut up. And don't worry about the economy, we'll continue to print money. Look at your GDP figures. Everybody says, oh, this is great. Well, a third to half of that's government money anyway. Right. People don't get to get it. You've talked about the economy. That thing is on its way down into the abyss. But until it strikes, people will stand back and they'll wonder and wait. But at some point, things that fall into the abyss eventually reach bottom. And then all hell is going to break loose. But no one today who is going to vote and wants to vote, who cares about the country, gives a damn what's happening in Eastern Europe, or for that matter, in the Middle East. No one's interested in joining these wars. They don't want us to be dragged into these wars. They want things to be made right here at home. And if I were advising President Trump, and I'm sure he has plenty of people telling us, it doesn't matter what you say about the other things. What is the top issue for American people? Border security, end to illegal immigration, crush the criminality expel the illegals. That's what Americans want. Talk about that, you're going to get elected. I think he knows that.
You know Trump very well. If he becomes president again, clearly it looks like he's going to win the Republican nomination unless something crazy happens with Nikki Haley in the deep state wanting to install her in his stead. But if he becomes the Republican nominee and if he goes on to win the election and you were to advise the president, what would you advise him to do on Ukraine?
Well, as far as Ukraine is concerned, I would immediately announce the suspension of all aid to the Ukrainian regime, to Zelensky. Then privately, through channels, I would let Moscow know that we're interested in settling this issue as quickly as possible. Let us know when and where you want to meet, and we'll help settle this issue. And I would inform all of our NATO allies of the same thing. So that's the way you handle Ukraine. It's not going to happen overnight. I know he says, well, I can stop this in 24 hours. But even if you told the Russians you were going to do that, they'd wait for 2 weeks to see whether or not you did it.
Right.
There's no reason for them to believe us.
Well, they know in the Tucker Carlson interview they've been lied to multiple times. Promises made by Bill Clinton, promises made by George W. Bush, promises made over and over again that have been broken. So they're going to sit back and wait to see if this is a legitimate move or not. It'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to watch what Donald Trump does on these big issues. If he's paying attention.
One thing to remember about President Trump is that every one of his rallies that he attended in 2016, when he was running for election the first time, you had tens of thousands of people chant the same slogan over and over and over again: "Build the wall, build the wall, build the wall." He was elected, and what did he do? He focused on Obamacare. So my concern is much will depend upon the people who surround him, the people whom he listens. And I'm not very encouraged by the so-called America First Institute down in Florida and the people that are there, or the usual suspects that go back to the last administration that seem to populate his inner circle. So I just don't know. So for me to say categorically he will do X, Y, and Z is impossible.
Right.
I just don't.
Yeah, I think, that's exactly right. There's so many people surrounding him. The idea of draining the swamp, that was the goal, right? To drain the swamp. It only got larger under Trump. And a lot of people say, well, it was the people surrounding him that insulated the swamp from being.
Hello?